Hi, I'm Marcia Lehman, and I'm a Knox County Master Gardener. And as you can see from the title slide, today we will be pruning Clematis. There are three basic types of Clematis. I never knew that for the longest time. And someone gifted me a Clematis, and I had no idea what type it was, so I didn't know what to do with it. So I didn't do much, and it turns out that that was actually a good thing. But we're going to talk about the three different types today, and I'm doing this with PowerPoint because I do not have specimens for the three different types. They grow very similarly, but what is different is when they bloom. So we're going to talk about classic type 1, type 2, and type 3. They're also sometimes referred to as type A, type B, type C, and I think that adds to the confusion. Let's get started. Type 1. These are the early bloomers. And as you might suspect, if they are the first ones to bloom of the various types of clematis, then it is because they bloom on old wood, last year's growth. So the buds were formed in the fall, and if you pruned them during the winter, you took off all those buds. So don't do that. So what is important, if you don't know what type clematis you have, is to watch when it blooms. So again, type 1 are the early bloomers, and the good news is they don't get heavily pruned. They don't need much pruning. Again, they're the first to bloom, so if they need any touch-up, if it's apparent that there's some dead stems in there, obviously the dead you can take out any time, but you would only give them a little trim if it's needed after they have finished flowering. The other big difference, and this goes across all types of clematis, is that you know that I like to start pruning from the bottom and take out suckers and work my way up. No, 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 not with clematis. They are different. With the clematis, we start pruning from the top. And with type 1, by the time it has finished flowering, it will be very apparent if there are any dead stems because there will be no leaves, there will be no blossoms, there will be no spent flowers. So we're going to prune after flowering to get rid of any of the 4Ds, dead, diseased, damaged, or dysfunctional, and maybe a little shaping if it's gotten messy, just to tidy it up. So a lot of this is really going to depend on how big of a trellis or support structure you have. Because if you have a small trellis, then you're going to want to prune it to keep it on that trellis. If you've got a much larger trellis, then you can let this thing vine to its heart's content and just go in regularly and take out the dead stuff. So that's type 1. And if you do have a plant tag, then you might see Clematis montana, alpina, macropetala, armandi, or as shown in the picture, Clematis spooneri. Type 1, easy peasy, early bloomers. Don't prune them in the fall or you will be taking off the spring flowers. Type 2, these are the mid-season bloomers, not as early as the type 1. With type 2, you need to be a little careful. Type 2 tends to produce large flowers on older vines, that's old woods, but they can bloom on old wood as well as new wood, which is why you need to be careful. The bigger flowers tend to come on the older vines. The newer wood would produce flowers and they will be smaller. So that's your indication of which is the older and newer wood. But type 2 can bloom on both old and new. So in the spring, we would do some pruning to remove ends that are damaged or that are showing no signs of growth. And you have to be really careful because on a clematis, a dead stem is the same color as a live stem. So what you're looking for in spring is signs of those new buds, whether they be leaf buds or flower buds. So you start at the top and you prune down until you encounter the first live bud. Again, let them go ahead and flower. And by this time, anything that doesn't have green on it or a flower or a spent flower is dead, and then you can remove the dead vines. The nice part about type 2, the trade-off to that you have to be a little careful when pruning, is that type 2 tend to have the largest flowers. And as shown in the picture here, Clematis rhapsody is a classic type 2, big purple flower. Other type 2 clematis include Bee's Jubilee, Nellie Moser, which is an absolutely gorgeous bicolor, Vivian Pannell, Pearl d'Azur, The President, Henri, and Ramona. This is another reason why you want to keep plant tags when you buy a plant. And if somebody gifts you a plant, you might ask them to also give you the plant tag. They can remove the price tag, but give you the plant tag. Type 3, these are the late bloomers. By now you probably have figured out that the late bloomers are the ones that bloom on new wood, on new vines. So for these, they can be pruned freely and often, or not at all. So again, they are late bloomers because first they have to come out of dormancy, put up new vines, and then bloom on those new vines. So again, in early spring, we would start pruning from the top and stop when we encounter that first live bud. If older vines appear to be damaged, well, then you can just go ahead and prune those really hard. And if you have a very large and very well-established clematis that you basically want to rejuvenate or renovate, in spring, you can cut that flat to the soil. Again, it'll put up all new stems and it'll bloom on those new vines. You may not have quite as many because you're not going to have as many new stems as the old stems that you removed. But since these are late bloomers, you can cut these back to the soil, let them put up new stems, and you will still get flowers the same year. After they've had that initial flush of flowers, you can give them a mid-season trim, and in about another 6 weeks, they will rebloom because, again, you trim them, pruning triggers new growth, they'll bloom on that new growth. The classic among type 3 is Clematis jackmani. That is the one that I've seen most often. But other ones include Viticella, Texensis, Prince Charles, Madame Julia Corriban, Ernest Markham, and Hagley Hybrid, and many, many, many more. So that's what you do if you know if you've got a type 1, a type 2, a type 3, because you know the variety name and you can go look it up and see if it's a type 1, 2, 3 or an ABC. But it's basically the early bloomers, mid-season bloomers, and late bloomers. And once you know when they bloom, you also know whether they're blooming on new vines or old vines. So that's the what and the when, and here's the how. Again, not like our usual practice of starting at the bottom and taking out suckers. This is a vine. So we want to start from the top. And again, dead stems on a clematis look the same as a live stem. So in spring, when they're starting to show signs of coming out of dormancy, we start pruning from the top and we stop when we encounter the first live bud. Whether that bud is a vegetative bud for a new leaf or a new stem, or it's a flower bud. You come down to the first live bud and snip above that bud, and then remove ends that are damaged or showing no signs of new growth. After it has fully leafed out and flowered, then any other dead vines become really obvious and you go in and you take those out. So if you don't know what type you have, again, watch for that first growth in early spring. And if it looks like a tangled mess of vines with some live and some dead growth interwoven, remember that the live and the dead look the same. It's the leafy growth from the buds that indicate if the vine is alive. So start at the top and work down, cutting out dead wood on each vine of the plant, and work down until you find a live bud or some new growth and cut right above that live bud. And then pick each of the individual vines and work on it until it is either pruned to new growth or G, You kept snipping away and you got all the way down to the ground. When you're done with that, then secure each of those vines to the trellis, depending on the size trellis you have, but attach that vine to the trellis. And remember, it's a twiner. So it is the vine itself that wraps around the trellis. So you aren't going to need clips or plastic ties or anything. And they don't put out tendrils to wrap around. It is the actual vine that will wrap around whatever support structure you have. And then move on to the next plant. So what does new growth look like? I put a couple of pictures to make a couple of points and to show you where to make this cut. One of the things that can be a bit challenging about clematis is that it has opposite stems and branches, and the buds are also opposite. And what I have found in my pruning of other shrubs is the alternate branches are easier to make a nice, clean, lovely cut. When it is an opposite branch, like this one right in the middle here, when you've got a bud coming out here and a bud coming out here, and you want to make a cut right about there, you can't get your pruners in there. So you're going to make the cut about here because that's probably as low as you can get into that stem without damaging either of these buds. So on the one on the left, I would make the cut about here. The one in the middle, I would make the cut here. And over here, where I've got new leaves coming out, I would make the cut there. So those opposite stems and branches can make it a challenge to get a really, really nice cut right above the new growth. Just make the best cut that you can. And with that, that's it on how to prune clematis. I had heard for all these years about type 1, 2, 3, and I was so confused. So I decided I was going to figure this out. I would encourage you to look at the handout that goes along with this video. It has a couple more good pictures in it. It has some additional resources and references that go through the various type 1, 2, 3 and list species and varieties. That's from the University of Delaware. A great pruning article from the University of Kansas. And then the folks from North Carolina State have multiple pages on the individual varieties of clematis. I hope you learned something today, and I thank you for joining us.